Wrestlenomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line, I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates, plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
Welcome all to the Thanksgiving edition of Pollock and Thurston. I am John Pollock, a month removed from Thanksgiving, joined by America's own Brandon Thurston, who will be celebrating the big day tomorrow. Hello, Brandon.
Hello, John. I was thinking about this discussion. So I need you to educate me as a dumb American about Thanksgiving in Canada. I know you have it in October. Is that right? Can you confirm
Correct.
that?
Yes.
And is it really like the whole Thanksgiving feast tradition like it is in the US?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We kill our turkeys and do the whole same thing just 5 weeks before you do.
Why? What's the history? Like why does the US do it in November and Canada does it in October?
I can't give you like the historical origin point of Canada, other than we give thanks in October, get things in early, and thus we can get the full value out of the Halloween season, followed by the Christmas season of sales that follow it, and get a whole 2 months of Christmas season begins November 1st here in Canada. That's when Starbucks turns over, and that's kind of how you know your seasonal changes.
And do you have a November holiday then?
We have not a holiday, although some places get it's not like a statutory holiday for everyone, but Remembrance Day is one where it's something some places do observe it as a day off work, but
which coincides with our Veterans Day.
Yes. Yes. November 11th is the same. So some crossover there, but we don't have a November holiday. Unless you call that the this past Sunday's Grey Cup, which is a big deal here in Canada.
That's the CFL championship.
The CFL, the Montreal Alouettes, the big winners this year. Watched by 2.8 million people on TSN.
Really?
Oh yes, they were ecstatic over these giant football numbers. Television is back. Television is back, Brandon.
I've heard the NHL in the US is doing really well.
And Monday Night Football on Monday. Largest broadcast of a Monday Night Football game since November of 1996. So you know what that means. Raw must have got killed. One of the lowest Raw numbers in history, I assume. Probably, maybe lowest ever. How far did the demo fall, Raw, this week?
The demo was up, and Raw did just fine. Total viewership was down a little bit from the prior week and from the surrounding weeks. It was just down by a hair. And the demo was actually the best demo, a 0.49. I'm doing this from memory at the moment. A 0.49 in the demo, which was the best demo for Raw this NFL season since it's begun to go against
football season.
Yeah.
This was one of the most impressive Raw numbers in maybe all year when you consider what they were up against. Again, there were over 28 million people watching this Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs game on Monday night across ABC, ESPN, and the Manning cast, featuring a very disinterested Mark Wahlberg, who, his mug has just been shared everywhere, just looking like he would have rather been anywhere, but maybe he was missing out on Raw. But yes, so Raw's demo, the largest since Labor Day Monday. This is an incredible stat. I think that obviously this is going to put Drew McIntyre and Jey Uso very high onto future Observer Hall of Fame ballots because they have bucked the NFL.
Yeah, and they opened the show, right, with their live promo. I mean, it's a pretty normal looking trend. I looked at the quarter hours yesterday. I didn't see any huge stories here. There's quite a decline for the Nia Jackson Raquel Rodriguez match. There's a lit up green box here for the demo for the 9:45 quarter, which had the Miz and Gunther promo, which got a lot of talk about it. But it's a pretty normal trend. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the fact that they were up and not affected as anything, I think that I can't even look at WWE as like they're going through this wave, but certainly there's engagement in the shows that, I mean, has just made it less less reactionary than something gigantic that's happening outside of its purview over with a big game, whether or not Taylor Swift's parents opt to attend a game.
Imagine the rating if Taylor Swift had been there.
Then who knows what would have happened to Raw's demo? Maybe it would have doubled at that point.
But we are seeing in total viewership year over year, we are seeing the flattening out here of SmackDown and Raw up until this point. I mean, this week is an exception, but Raw is down year over year in total viewership. It's down 9%. How does the demo look? The demo is still up, though, for both of these shows on the quarter. And on the month, Raw is softening. But Raw's in November is up in the demo. So sort of a mixed story there with TV ratings for Raw and SmackDown. Maybe not as highly exceeding the prior year's trends as they were earlier in the year, but still doing pretty healthy. I did have a report today, though, looking at the WrestleTix estimated tickets distributed for Raw and SmackDown and house shows, and we are seeing some comparisons that are less favorable, finally, for WWE compared to the same event in the same town. Whereas up until this point, up until November, it's been basically just a hot streak of they're doing better and better every time they go back to a given town with the same event.
Yeah, and that's obviously something to look at it as well. Like they've been on this run now, and looking at these year-to-year comparisons, is this going to be a softening? And yeah, if it is something that extends for a period of time, they are coming up on their big final house show tour of the year, which are traditionally a very well-attended week of WWE events. And but also a lull in their calendar, much like last year, where once Survivor Series is done, there is no big show until the Rumble, which is 2 months away. They don't have that end of the year or early January pay-per-view in between there.
Yeah, it seems like they've really so this year and the year before that, they've made enough for to just not do a pay-per-view in December.
Other than the NXT one.
True. Yeah. As far as a main roster pay-per-view, they did day one, what's I guess coming up on 2 years ago. That was the big Nick Khan pay-per-view, his idea to name it that. But that did not continue in the following year. But yeah, they leave this lull between Survivor Series and Royal Rumble the last couple of years.
Well, let's stay on the ratings front since we dove into this, and just going to circle back to Friday, because this was the rare Friday night where we had 2 hours of SmackDown going against 2 hours of Collision, followed by an hour of Rampage, followed by a half-hour countdown special. How many of these 5.5 hours did you stay glued to your television for on Friday night, Brandon?
I had SmackDown on mute, I think. Collision. What was on Collision? So Collision, of course, and SmackDown were going head to head. I did have two screens going at one point. And I think not even on mute. I did have SmackDown not on mute. I did see some of the Daniel Garcia and Miro match. Do I remember anything from either of these shows? Not really. But I did watch some of it. I don't think I watched any of Rampage though.
Yeah, it was this was a lot of wrestling to digest and take in. It was an overload of wrestling television, and people certainly made their decisions on Friday night. SmackDown, even with the more direct competition in terms of professional wrestling, viewership was basically the same from the prior week. 2,206,000 viewers. Their demo up 8% to a 0.62. They did not take any loss in audience against Collision. They were up from the prior week, and exceptionally so with female viewers from the week prior. Collision, I mean, we knew it was going to fare poorly against SmackDown, and it did, doing what was expected to be its lowest viewership ever, which was achieved. And then Rampage also doing its lowest viewership to date, but this being in its regular time slot that it's in each week. 280,000 viewers for Rampage, 0.09, slightly above what Collision did, but not a great 3 hour block for AEW.
Yeah, the big story here to me is that SmackDown had no impact here. I think we all expected Collision would go in and have its lowest rating ever. It actually performs slightly lower than what Rampage performed at in the following hour. But I was wondering if Collision, now granted Collision is not like a strong injection into this time slot, given it is the program that's moving out of its normal time slot, being preempted into SmackDown's time slot. But despite the fact that SmackDown was going against another pro wrestling show from the number 2 wrestling company, no effect. SmackDown was up from the last couple weeks. Does that tell us anything about the strength of SmackDown or the weakness of Collision, in that it just didn't have any effect on SmackDown? You know, it's not like Collision is, if it was Dynamite, let's imagine, moving from Wednesday to Friday, I imagine it would have had a greater effect on SmackDown. I imagine SmackDown would not be up as much as it was up from the prior week compared to itself. Does that tell us that Collision is moving closer to being of the importance of Rampage in the viewers' eyes?
I mean, if it's hard to take one week's number and Collision off of its normal night, but the fact it didn't put any kind of not one bit of a dent into SmackDown, like, it would suggest to me that Collision, I would say to the consumer of Collision, that it is a show that is closer to Rampage than it is Dynamite. I don't know if Dynamite would be appreciably better than this on a night where it's going against SmackDown, but I think it emphasizes the audience that SmackDown has, that this was seen as a relevant show that people were tuning into. Now, it's worth noting that Collision, just in looking at the female numbers, were actually up from Collision's numbers the prior Saturday. They actually did attract more female viewers on this Friday night, but overall, I mean, still, these are very low viewership numbers for Collision. But yeah, it also was not a marquee show. It's not like they threw some big match at you or some must-see last-minute angle to hype up the pay-per-view the next night. Like, it was a 2-hour wrestling show, and you got your requisite good wrestling on the show, easy to digest show, but nothing that you were going to be living or dying by if you caught it or missed it.
Yeah, this wasn't the souped-up competition that NXT versus Dynamite was several weeks ago when they were both on Tuesday night. Did you see the court hours for Collision? I thought it was remarkable that the first quarter of Collision had 386,000 viewers, 386. And then the very next quarter, 279, which is a little bit higher than the rest of the show was. This huge fall off from quarter hour 1 to quarter hour 2. I looked into it and I asked, was there a big lead in here or something? And you know what the lead in was? It was the Transformers movie being rerun on TNT. And I got the final quarter hour, which was lower than this first quarter hour for Collision. So I don't know what it was about the content. The first quarter hour was a Christian Cage live promo, Ricky Starks, Big Bill backstage segment, Miro versus Dan Garcia, which continued on into the next quarter. So I don't know if it was the content of that first quarter hour or if people checked out. I don't know. I can imagine a story. People checked out Collision for, less than 15 minutes and then gravitated to SmackDown. I don't know.
They transformed into SmackDown viewers by minute number 5, or thought that they were watching SmackDown when Christian walked out and realized, wait a minute, this is not SmackDown. This was obviously like a very, I did not know what the lead-in number was, but it's a very curious spike. And I mean, it's something we could even look at, like the first quarter of Raw, like how many viewers are at least aware of a program being on that is going to tune in and see if something grabs them. And more often than not, they are not committed to sticking around much longer. And I don't know what you can do as a hook in those first couple of minutes that are going to keep someone that is just tuning in, but at least the show had its curiosity and quickly lost it.
Yeah. But the first quarter hour did 315, so substantially lower than what that first quarter hour was. So they could have inherited some viewers, but that's pretty remarkable that the first quarter hour of Collision itself was a lot higher than the last quarter hour of the Transformers.
Have you heard the biggest secret in professional wrestling this week? I will let you in on this news that Rampage is airing on Saturday night this week. Are you aware of this?
I heard about that. I became aware of that when I became aware that the Nielsen ratings are going to be delayed for Thanksgiving, and that the whatever day it's going to end up being reported. I have a note on the Patreon about it, that Collision and Rampage are going to come out together because they are airing on the same day, Saturday night.
Yes, so Rampage will air. They're doing the tapings on Saturday night from Pittsburgh. So Rampage will air from 7 till 8 p.m. Eastern. Then At 8 p.m., we have Collision, which is going head to head with the Survivor Series. So it is possible that Collision and Rampage could do even lower numbers this week. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, even with Collision back in its regular slot. I think Survivor Series has a ton of momentum going into it, between the War Games concept, your Randy Orton return, and it's just a hot streak that WWE seems to have interest-wise. And we've seen enough patterns now of what these premium live events do on an AEW number. And this, I would say this feels like a bigger show than SummerSlam did, and that would probably be the biggest one they have faced so far in Collision's history.
Yeah, and I guess the pre-show probably of Survivor Series will probably start at 7 and oppose Rampage.
Yeah, which are pretty much just the talking heads hour of WWE, unless they opt to put a match on, which, I mean, maybe they will. But yeah, they will be going against the pre-show with Rampage. So it looks like a tough weekend for AEW viewership, but we have 3 nights of pro wrestling in Chicago, and we'll be chatting about this shortly with Nick Hausman, who will be joining us as well. That starts tonight with AEW Dynamite at the Wintrust Arena in Chicago, and then is followed by WWE at the Allstate Arena Friday and Saturday night for SmackDown and the Survivor Series, which are doing very well ticket-wise. Survivor Series, WrestleTix reporting, eclipsing 17,000 tickets that have been distributed, and they are looking to fit as many human bodies as possible into this setup that they have constructed for Saturday night.
No stage. You can see it in the ticket map here. There's going to be fans behind where the stage would be. Usually this entire end zone area would be blocked off. So 17,000 tickets out. How is the SmackDown doing? I have the SmackDown here for the same venue. The Allstate Arena, formerly known as the Rosemont Horizon, is at 15,603 tickets out. And they're also trying to sell that end zone stage area, which is, of course, going to be open because it's going to be the same setup, apparently. But lots of tickets that you can get on that end of the arena if you want to get to SmackDown. And
this will also be airing on FS1, as they announced last week. So you will have... Due to NCAA football, they are moving SmackDown to FS1, which is something we had not seen in like previous years. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's only been that World Series week in October that SmackDown gets bounced to FS1.
Pac-12 last year in December. Yeah, World Series. Yeah, I think just World Series in the Pac-12 is what it's been preempted for.
We had that Christmas Day SmackDown where they got that massive lead in from the NFL. That was on Fox. That was on Fox.
Yes.
But anyway, it was something Way brought up, and it'll be interesting to see if Fox is more reactive to throwing SmackDown on FS1 with a not regularity, but more often than in the past, given this next year. Like, you're less incentivized when you know this is sort of a lame duck program on your schedule for the next year.
Yeah, in blue here are all the FS1 preemptions. What was it preempted in July for? What would that be? July 21st, it was preempted to SmackDown.
All-Star game? No, not on a Friday. I'd be guessing off the top of my head.
Someone in the chat will tell us. But yeah, it's December 2nd, I believe, was the Pac-12 championship game that was airing on Fox. And then we have New Year's Eve. There must have been something else, maybe college football, but yeah.
So there you have it. That is coming up this weekend. We will chat with Nick Hausman about the scene in Chicago this coming week, what he is attending, and what to expect tonight, which will feature the start of the Continental Classic, the Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is tournament, as Tony Khan has dubbed it. And we have the league announcements. Bryan Danielson, Andrade El Idolo, Brody King, Claudio Castagnoli, Daniel Garcia, and Eddie Kingston in one block. John Moxley, Swerve Strickland, Roosh, Mark Briscoe, Jay Lethal, and Jay White in the Gold League, as we will get 3 matches tonight, 2 more on Collision, and the big emphasis, no run-ins allowed in this tournament.
He's not kidding.
No.
I like that these are blue and gold, as opposed to the G1 where you have A and B. That's interesting. But what did you think of, we talked about it quite a bit on Sunday. What did you think of the put your money where your mouth is, which is not a direct quote. It was slightly different. There was an F word involved in there.
It's obviously, I think, criticism that he has taken, again, as I think it was Jesse that like pointed this out. Like, this was not Tony being directly asked about, reactions from fans or anything. Like, this was his own explanation and kind of fishing for an explanation and coming across this where he gave this. But I think that it certainly comes off as more than a hint of frustration on his part. I think that they are trying to adjust its programming and not necessarily appreciating the response that he's obviously seeing and being aware of. I think that I don't know, in this climate, to me, I would never be attacking any portion of my fan base when I am asking them to follow so much content and to tune into so many hours of my programming that I would want to in any way invalidate their opinions or, you better show up to watch this tournament. However, like, significant you want to put into his words. Like, I think if you're a fan that has been against certain aspects, like, I think there's fair criticism to be out there. There's a lot of unfair criticism that I'm sure he is privy to, but I feel that in this instance, like, it's an audience that you don't want to turn yourself against your audience. That I think you really want to position yourself as like, we are the fan first product that is always going to put fans first, even if privately you can vent your frustrations about unfair criticisms or things you disagree with. But I don't think you want to come out in such a combative way with your audience that is seeking a product that is differentiating itself and elements that they don't want to see this just become woven into a product that they did not sign up for.
Yeah. And I know some would say in reaction to the reaction of his comment, which was it's not like he was screaming this. It was an offhanded comment. He was just sort of saying it in passing, although he did bring it up in the context of defending the MJF and Adam Cole match and giving it credit for getting the crowd into it. And he brought it up in the context of, if you want to see a sports-like presentation, I'm paraphrasing, where there's no interference, well, put your money where your effing mouth is. But are we making too big of a deal of something that was just sort of said in passing, or is it right to take his words at face value?
I think anytime you are, representing your company and you're putting stuff out there, I think you have to expect that there is going to be weight placed behind those words that you are going to put out there. And if you're not willing to clarify it on the spot, then I think you leave it to that interpretation. That if you're a fan that has not enjoyed aspects of, like, I think it was a pretty unanimous viewpoint that was taken from Saturday's pay-per-view about the whole, like, tease of taking the main event away, and here we are, we're going to hand the title over, and then the injured guys replaced. That I don't think people had much, like, I did not enjoy any of that, but I thought the match itself was very strong. I don't know if everyone was on board with my opinion of the match itself, because it's gotten a terrible cage match rating, but I think that is also tied to the whole storyline that was attached to it. I think that's where the genesis of the negativity comes from. But to me, like, that is, you put out a product, hopefully you listen to your audience and you have that gauge. Like, when we had Tony on, I asked him, who do you lean on when there can be a lot of bad faith criticism that comes your way? How do you wade through that to find the good faith criticism? And I think that has to come outside of your right-hand man in the company or your team around you. That is
someone you pay.
Not going to be incentivized to tell you your ideas are not working like they used to. I think that's very important for a guy that I am sure is very active online and aware of a lot of the criticisms. And it can become very easy to paint it all as negativity and people that don't know what they're talking about, and paint the critics as your haters and dismiss all kinds of criticism as bad faith, when you can parse a lot of that as legitimate criticism that can improve your product. And when you take in so much of that, it becomes very easy to dismiss the negativity as frivolous. Yeah.
And well, we know he reads Cage Match, and he reads a lot of things that are written online. But this is a different dynamic, I think, than Tony and AEW have ever been in before, as it relates to the content and the way that some people at least are reacting to it. Clearly I thought it was really interesting, the conversation that you had with Rob Viper on a recent update, where he was talking about how the crowd is different in terms of, it feels more like, and maybe it goes both ways in terms of maybe some of the people who were really enthusiastic about AEW and maybe wanted that sports-like presentation, maybe some of those people have fallen away, and maybe as WWE has gotten better, it's made people feel more comfortable to be enthusiastic about WWE in non-WWE settings. He gave the example that you're hearing people, do the LA Knight, doing Jey Uso catchphrases and things like that at AEW shows, which would have been unheard of a couple years ago.
No, it's I think it's become much more sort of the WWE product is not going to get you the negative kind of reaction that it would have even a year ago, much less 2 years ago. I think that's greatly changed, that the WWE has rehabilitated itself in many people's eyes in terms of the product on screen that they are presenting to you. And I think as well, you're getting AEW that we can look at a lot of these shows that I think are still getting, in terms of like their big shows, they have put together some excellent pay-per-views this year. But I think from a standpoint of, they've never been as much under the microscope as now. And I think you can see some of the areas of, improvement that they need to make. And sometimes it's a very difficult challenge when you sense that there's a bit of that momentum shift and that cool factor that they have given up. Like, as much as WWE would control market share, the cool factor belonged to AEW for some time. And I think that's been more than dispersed over this last year or so. And AEW is very hard to fight that and reclaim some of that when you're putting out these great shows, and it's areas of creative that are now being more scrutinized. And I think, that opens itself up to wider criticisms, and that's sort of where we are now.
Yeah. And we can detail, it would be one thing if the business was on an upswing while the product has changed, but it's not the case. Dynamite ratings are down year over year. Rampage ratings are down year over year. Collision is a complicated story. I won't dictate a verdict about it just yet. Maybe sometime early next year. But ticket sales are at best flat and are at least, I would say more appropriately slightly down. So the business, the consumer trends don't point in the right direction while these changes have happened. And it's not just because of not just because of the change in the content that we're talking about in terms of what's happening in the main event, MJF, Adam Cole. The lack of CM Punk is a factor. Maybe there's other things that are a factor. The increase of content maybe just dilutes the attention span that people have, or the time that people have to watch Dynamite. The increase in live events, maybe that dilutes it. But this is not coinciding with an uptick in fan interest.
Yeah. And that's, that is the balancing act that I think both companies have had to find as they continue to produce more and more content, keeping it relevant. And inevitably there was going to be, I think, a level of your audience that you are asking of to keep up with your product, that you understand there is going to be, like, we go back, and Tony Khan mentioned the fact that he never wanted Dynamite to be 3 hours. And I think he understood the idea of less is more, but we're in an economy now where more content is the order of the day. But producing all of this content, how much is that, worn on your audience to keep all of these hours fresh? And I think that becomes really, really tough when you're just being great is almost just considered expected at this point as well, that it's the managing of all of these hours that you're talking about, where AEW went from a 2 hour a week commitment to now it's 5 a week, plus now pay-per-views every 6 weeks, on top of Ring of Honor, on top of all of these different things that you are being asked to watch. And if you're doing your best to keep up with these, you're being scolded at press conferences. Put your money where your mouth is, and you better be tuning in for this.
Yes.
I think it all adds up. I don't think there's one specific answer to any of this. But we know one man who may have the answer to all of life's questions. He is returning here as a guest on Pollock and Thurston. He's got some exciting projects on the horizon. And as the wrestling world descends upon his hometown, I'm sure he's going to be all over with coverage this week from the House of Wrestling. He is the landlord, Nick Hausman, who is with us. Hello, Nick.
Hi, guys. Yeah, the landlord of House of Wrestling. It's me. Man, I was just listening to you guys just say all these really super positive, upbeat things. I'm in the mood for some wrestling chat now. I'm great.
Well, we figured with Chicago getting its fill, quote unquote, of wrestling coming up this week.
Oh, I see what you did there.
How much will you be attending in person, Nick, over these next couple of nights between Dynamite tonight and then back to back at the Allstate Arena?
Oh, I'm only going to be at Survivor Series. There's not really press events available for me tonight after Dynamite or after SmackDown on Friday. So I'm going to save myself some drives. Sitting here watching them from home with my wife. But yeah, I'll be out there Survivor Series Saturday night. And my wife has also been approved for press somehow. So she'll maybe make her debut in the press scrum, the press conference Saturday night as well.
Yeah, and I have to point out, if people are listening in audio only, they're missing out on the gloriousness of Nick Hausman's mustache, as the video viewers are enjoying right now.
Thank you, Brandon. Yes, I was going to wait to the end, but I have a new show, Rumor and Innuendo, that's going to be debuting this Monday after Survivor Series. The mustache will be gone by Monday. The mustache will actually be gone by Saturday by the time Survivor Series happens. I'll be clean cut. So this is it. This is last hurrah for the mustache here on old Pollock and Thurston.
All right. Well, you should get video evidence of this mustache bidding farewell. I mean, this should be a hook for the first episode.
It comes back every so often. It's whatever. So.
Well, we're going to transition onward, but I guess just looking at sort of where we are at this stage of things with AEW. This is, of course, a yearly tradition for them on Thanksgiving Eve in Chicago. Yeah. How would you assess this couple of month period for AEW? We'll call it the post-Punk period of All Out weekend and where we are some 2 months later.
Man, it's really weird, right? Like the product is a little all over the place. It grabs people at certain points and then loses them at others. I think that you guys hit the nail on the head when you were talking just before I came on about how they just need a hook. They need something to make it cool again, right? I agree with the general consensus that this G1 style tournament is probably not going to give them any more of a cool factor or grab anybody outside of the people that are already watching it. So I think they need somebody outside the box. Tony has been so engaged with AEW and now Ring of Honor for years now, right? Even back in Memphis, they'd have like 2 bookers a year. You'd cycle out, somebody'd leave, somebody'd come back, keep the product fresh. Vince was always, in charge, but there were those periods where he'd lean on people or bring people in close that he knew could give him a perspective that he wasn't seeing. Tony's got to find somebody that he can carry the weight with. I've been asking around quite a bit about what the creative process is like at AEW these days. And it just seems like it's kind of a revolving door of who has Tony's attention at the moment. And it's really not a way to keep consistent booking. It's not only the fact that I don't think that Tony's keeping the same people around him all the time or consistently listening to people so much as how much freedom so many of the talents also seem to have. It's not any one particular thing I think I can put my finger on that is creating this kind of formatted style or whatever it is. Like, it's not gelling all as like one consistent thing from beginning to end. It's many things, and it's a lot of different reasons we're getting that at the moment. So there you go.
Do you get a sense of who has his ear at the moment, or is or would we just be speculating?
I would be speculating, but I do know that they're obviously, like, for example, QT Marshall was somebody who was very engaged with Tony for a while. Seems QT is no longer the person that is the go-to. You've had Jimmy Jacobs, Sanjay Dutt's, another name that I've kind of heard has fallen into more of a creative role or right-hand man with Tony, right? But then you still have the Bucks, who are EVPs, and Kenny, who are coming in and wanting to have their say when it happens. And, of course, Max, MJF, has taken on a much more invested creative role, especially in his work. And I know that he's, got some input in some other stuff that's going on the show as well. So even just right there, it's like 4 or 5 people that Tony's kind of looking to that are kind of doing their own thing. But I don't know that all of those people are necessarily always talking to each other to create kind of a show or a flow, a cohesion that can go from beginning to end, So
I would say on the other side, as we have talked about a lot of the challenges they have gone through, I mean, going into this year, if you were looking at the prospect of this is going to be a contract year for the Young Bucks, for Kenny Omega, and you're going to come out of this year with those three under contract with Hangman Page for years to come, a signing of Kota Ibushi, a signing of Will Ospreay. Like, these are significant signings that Tony has been able to make. All of, perhaps with the exception of an Ibushi, like, you knew that there was interest on the other side of the fence from, and like the roster it's an embarrassment of riches. But the fact that those signings were made, Ospreay being the latest one, like, these are significant coups by the company that they've been able to finalize.
Yeah, no. And for what I heard about Will signing, creative freedom was a big part for him. Like, he just felt like, from what I gather, he could be doing more at AEW that he wanted to do. But that's the reason a lot of guys sign with AEW, right? You always hear that. I have more creative freedom. I can do more of what I want to do. Okay, well, what happens when everyone has creative freedom and is doing what they want to do? Sometimes people are being heard and other people aren't, because other people in the room are talking about what they want their creative vision to be. And you can't give everybody all of what they want all of the time. And that is where you're going to have some frustrations with people. Again, Max gets everything he wants. Max can do whatever he wants. That's not the case for everybody else who thought they were going to get to be in that position. So I don't know. I hope that they can find a way to get this all. I think they just need I think they need somebody there to work closely with Tony to help filter all these ideas and pull them all together. Because, an example right now, the Bucks leaving TV, acting on this heel turn or whatever. I had heard rumor and innuendo, that they wanted to have the match with FTR in LA. They wanted to run back what happened at Wembley, and it didn't happen. Right. And because of that, now you had to take two of your top draws, singles draws, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega. They got to have their big match with their friends. They got to work with their friends, but they're whatever, weirdly going away, it sounds like, because Brandon Cutler is going to be their voice piece or whatever. So, I just feel like there's a lot of concessions and pushing and jockeying going on right now, and not a lot of straightforward here's where we're going, here's what we're doing. It's like, it's kind of this amorphous flow right now of creativity over at AEW.
Yeah. Speaking of MJF, you had a report a couple days ago,
right,
about the questions around whether MJF has really is there really going to be a War of 24 where he might negotiate with the WWE or not, or has he? I would guess, just as a guess, that at some time around when he returned to television after his infamous promo where he was gone for about 3 months in 2022, weird. I would guess maybe there was an extension signed around that time. But you had a report related to that recently.
I love you, Brandon. Brandon is correct. Yes, it is a weirdly, almost specifically 90-day period in which MJF was gone after calling Tony a money mark on live television. Felt like a suspension, but they never put it that way. Yes, I also heard rumblings at the time that Max had re-signed or extended his deal for a bigger, much larger deal at that time. But they've played it up as if Max's deal was never re-upped or re-signed. They've tried to make this bidding war 2024 thing going on. And I'll just be honest here. I was talking to somebody higher up at WWE the other day about something kind of innocuous that I thought was kind of innocuous anyway, and out of nowhere was hit with a, hey, you ever see these MJF saying he's going to go into this bidding war? And I'm like, how could you miss it? And they're like, yeah, we've never talked to him. Could you let people know that? And I'm like, okay, if you'd like. And so that's where it started. But it had been mentioned in that call that there was an internal belief that he had resigned into possibly as far as 2027. I had heard similar from multiple people basically up until the point that I got that particular call. And when all the pieces came together, that's what I reported. That's what I put out there. So Max and Tony have not come out, disputed the reporting, commented on the reporting. So unless told otherwise, I am under the impression that Max is under contract with AEW longer than what he is letting on right now.
Yeah, it seems like the timing of December 30th being their what's the name of the pay-per-view?
World's End.
Being the night that they're going to do that pay-per-view in Long Island, in MJF's hometown, or close to it, that maybe that would be, I imagine they were going to play it up as like this Summer of Punk type moment where maybe does he stay or does he go? Will he retain the title and then leave the company or something like that? But it sounds like he's staying with the company for the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked around about this before I ran it. I had a couple people that were like, dude, you are going to get so much heat. Max is going to blast you. You're going to get in trouble. I have not heard a peep about this particular story. And I don't know. I mean, it seemingly was the worst kept secret in pro wrestling. I mean, the amount of people that came out of the woodworks to text me or DM me, I'd be like, dude, you're right? And I'm like, of course I know I'm right. That's why I put the story out. Like, why would you think I did? Whatever. So anyway, I've it's definitely pointed out to me they have not been advertising Max for all in London. There's other places they have not been advertising Max for next year. It does seem as if there was some kind of possible campaign to convince people Max was maybe leaving to set up a moment like what you're talking about. So I don't know how this report changes that dynamic. Plans again. Did something else get thrown in disarray because of this now? I'm not really sure. I'm just telling everybody what I heard from reliable sources.
I think we just look at it from just like face value, that I think this babyface turn greatly changed whatever their plans were, because it's a very difficult like storyline to play out, that here's your top babyface that is threatening to leave the company, and to play that up to any kind of drama. I think that this is, suited for the previous character of MJF to be threatening to leave with the title. I think it's really hard to even play that out, nor would I really want to be introducing that story on my programming if I'm AEW at this point, that one of my stars wants to leave. I just don't feel now is the time you really want to be even throwing that out.
Well, I had to go back and Google Bidding War of 2024 before I ran the story to see if, because like one of the quotes I put in the article from somebody at WWE was like, I've heard that's why he's playing down the Bidding War of 2024, because he's actually resigned. He hasn't actually used the phrase Bidding War of 2024 since I think before August, right? Mm-hmm. There were comments he made playing into that because Sports Illustrated people asked him about it. And he was like, oh, yeah, sure. But he's not actively going out there at the moment and playing up this bidding. He'll play into it if somebody asks him about it, but he's not cutting those kinds of promos right now. So he may already have been moving away from it. It could have just been like whatever PR people, for whatever reason, didn't want to advertise others. Who knows? Could all just be tinfoil hat stuff. But I definitely got the impression. I mean, look, a couple days before the pay-per-view, he was playing into the idea that there was going to be, like, Tony Khan was desperately trying to keep him. And it sounds like, at least from WWE's end, they don't believe any of that to be true. They think this is a done deal and those two are playing, and they don't want to be a part of this storyline anymore.
Well, having Nick Hausman on, we are now going to move on to our other Chicago figure, that being one Billy Corgan, who you've been covering extensively. And last night, to the surprise of, not many that are online, we got the debut of the NWA on the CW app. No announcement by CW, no advance warning. They just plopped down 8 episodes onto the CW app. What did you think about this introduction of NWA Power to the CW app, Nick?
Oh, wow. It was surprising even by what was expected from those I had talked to. I was not expecting to see anything NWA related on any CW platform until early 2024. That's what Billy had teased. That's what people insert. Even people that thought, oh, well, the TV show is not going to happen, but they'll still throw it on the app. They'll put it on the app in early 2024. So this being rolled out when it was, with no announcement, caught even those that I spoke with that were, didn't know how Billy would handle this, caught them off guard. I do believe that these episodes are like older episodes that have already aired on YouTube. So I have a lot. I don't, another time maybe we could dive into the weeds. Like, I have a million thoughts on this particular subject, but I know that Billy spent a lot of money to get the show looking ready for CW. And these shows that are uploaded to the CW app are of a quality that could be put on television, right? Mm-hmm. But they were already aired on YouTube. So I don't really know what happened here. Like, this doesn't seem to me like, I'm just very confused by it. I'm just very, very confused by this. And
it felt like a very unorganized release, like to not even have the ability for NWA to announce that this is coming, to build some anticipation and just drop it on your lap out of nowhere. It just felt like the right hand not knowing what the left was doing.
I know people want to say Nick Hausman overblowing this, can't be as bad as described. And look, I'm not saying that anything's as bad or whatever. I'm just reporting what I am hearing and am told by reliable sources. I know the CW people were upset about the blowback they got after the cocaine spot at Sam Hain. And, I had heard that they were just like, we're done, right? And they're offloading this content early to get... Man, I don't want my comments to be misconstrued here because I know people of note actually listen to the show. But, they unloaded this quickly, possibly to move past Billy. Now, they still have reality show content on the way.
Right.
And as I have also reported, the only reason I think CW made a deal with Billy is they wanted the footage of his wedding. Mm-hmm. Okay? So they get the reality show, which I'm also told is more wrestling than they expected. They kind of wanted more that wedding, Billy, whatever. Billy then said, well, you want that? You also kind of got to get power, right? Or something along those lines. This is just how I've picked it up from various people. So the wrestling stuff was always going to air before the reality show, I was told, in early 2024. But not this early and probably on TV. I heard that with what I had heard was that this was all for trade. I've seen Wade say that, they got offered 8 figures or whatever for this. This doesn't look like how you treat a product that you paid 8 figures for. You don't offload it like this in the middle of the night on a Tuesday if you put 8 figures up for it, So the idea I'd always been heard was that this was for trade. Billy was looking for exposure for the NWA. If the show did well for season 1, then maybe they'd pay him for season 2, which is actually, I'm told, kind of a not so uncommon exchange in the television landscape these days. Brandon, you might know more about that.
When you say season 1, season 2, are we talking the reality show or Power?
Power.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think but again, Billy could come out right now and tell me how very, very wrong I am, but it just doesn't feel like there's any money that changed hands here. And I think and the reality show, maybe also season 2, he'd have got a budget for it if it does well. I don't really know what the expectations were, but I do know after Father James Mitchell did cocaine with Goat Boy or whoever, everything changed dramatically, and now we are where we're at.
So if I can lay out the facts as I understand them, based on what you've reported here. So CW really wants the reality show, and maybe Power was going to be a part of this as well. At least when you reported that this was going to happen several weeks ago, it sounded like both of those programs series were going to end up on CW's actual television network. Yes. Maybe it sounds like, especially with the Power episodes just suddenly appearing on the app, maybe the Power episodes are not going to end up on the television network. Maybe the reality show will still end up on the television network.
I have people telling me it'll be on the app, and I just
reality show or Power.
Well, Power's already on the app, but I'm told the reality show most likely app bound. But I even being told that the Billy Corgan wedding thing is a particularly valuable piece of content. Right. And I don't know that they can look past putting it on TV. Maybe they air it as like a marathon on a Saturday where it's like, be sure to tune in at 7 for the only episode that matters. I don't really know. But until I see it, it could go either way. But I have people telling me that it's app bound as well.
So in the timing of the NXT deal happening is interesting, right? I believe the sequence of events is you reported that NWA has a deal with CW.
Right.
Father James Mitchell does cocaine
with Goat Boy.
NXT has a deal, it's announced, with the CW. Right. Do you think do you think that the controversy surrounding the cocaine spot on the NWA pay-per-view had any role in the NXT deal happening?
I 100% do. I've had people from the WWE side tell me that they're under the impression that this came together as forcefully and as quickly as it did, specifically because of the cocaine spot. As you can, in one of my reports, I think there was a quote from somebody at the WWE that was like, there's never been a more costly mistake in all of professional wrestling history than the NWA Sam Hain cocaine spot. And again, the reason I think that this was so quickly shifted was and this is where we get into the weeds a little bit. Either Billy announced he had a deal without having it signed, or he had a deal, but the deal was for trade, which is a deal worth nothing other than I help you, you help me. After the cocaine spot, if he doesn't have a deal, then they're going to shift this thing over. But if he does have a deal and it's for trade, they can make the call. We're going to put this on the app rather than TV because all they're losing out on is whatever ad revenue they would have gotten for putting it on TV. So that's why I think that this was a for trade deal from the get. Now, once the decision is made, we're going to move this thing to the app. They still want another wrestling company on their airwaves. Now, we all obviously know they were talking to NXT. As I've reported, at some point, they approached Tony Khan for Ring of Honor. There are at least two other companies that I know, or I know of at least one other company that definitely met with them. I've heard of another major company that also met with them that I have not been able to verify, so we'll keep it as a tease for now. But they were talking to other people. I think when the Sam Hain spot ended, they went back, and whoever was the biggest fish next in line past Billy got the deal, and I think that was NXT.
Yeah, an interesting name in the middle of all of this is Brad Schwartz, who's one of the programmers at CW, who in another lifetime was at Pop TV when they had the relationship with TNA. So this is, and just given like the names that have been brought up here, like this is a network that seems to have a pretty healthy appetite for professional wrestling and not simply being swayed by the letters WWE. Like they are looking at professional wrestling of, various companies that might be able to bring an audience to their network.
Yeah, and the thing too is it's a 1-2 punch for them really with this. Actually, it's 3, right? There's 3 punches they got out of this. One was the bag of money, which is presumably more money than they were getting paid at USA. 2, they're in this antitrust lawsuit or whatever right now where they're being accused of not being able to share television channels with other wrestling products. Well, hey, look, we share space with WOW. Obviously, we're not giant bullies. We're doing this program on the same network as WOW. Right. And then 3, as they're involved in this lawsuit, trying to prove that they're not bullying people off their these various platforms, they get the added bonus of being told, hey, we don't want this person on our platform. We'd like you to be on our platform, which is them effectively doing that without having to do it. So there's like so many upshots, I think, for them in this deal moving to CW, on top of the fact of the belief CW is moving in a more sports-oriented direction, and they will use NXT as a big kind of selling point as they try to move in a more live events type space. So a lot of wins here across the board.
When it comes to sort of NWA going into this next year, like Billy has put a lot of resources into this company, and it feels as though there's always that carrot that all of these companies have dangling in front of them to move to the next level. Right. Are you looking at this as though this is our time to either, make some significant deal, or at that point you're starting to assess, like, am I just throwing bad money after good and essentially making a decision point here? Like this either gets us to the next level or it's time to reassess, like what's the viability of this group after years of putting money into it.
Well, that sets up another one of my exclusives, which was, about the impending roster and production costs. Now, yes, Billy is looking to cut a lot of costs right now at the year end. I know that there were production costs that already happened at the last set of tapings. One of the examples I gave in my reporting was, I believe, the hair and makeup budget has been like sliced in half. The roster cuts, I don't believe, will start until early 2024, and it's less of we're going to be releasing people as opposed to may not be re-signing as many people as expected. And that is why I'm under the belief right now from those I've talked to in the know that everyone is being watched right now, and their benefits and what they can contribute to the company are being weighed, which has resulted in a couple interesting things. First of all, Billy Corgan publicly went and talked to Mike Johnson, said, no, Nick Hausman's an idiot. We're very financially strong, and no one's getting fired, which, by the way, music to my ears. I'm really happy to hear Billy say nobody's getting fired. I don't want to take credit for that, but it is nice to hear him say that out loud. And then it brings the question up then, if he's cutting roster people, if he's cutting production people at a time when you were expecting an influx in money from the CW, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, which again kind of ties into my thought that this was always a trade deal from the beginning. because the cuts that are coming, I'm not under the impression were a reaction to the Sam Hain deal and the CW change. These were always anticipated coming, meaning this was always Billy's plan, was towards the end of the year to make these cuts. It just doesn't feel like a company that had the anticipation of a lot of money coming in at this period of time. So, and also they're still airing weekly YouTube shows. Where's this new content they're going to put on CW in early 2024 coming from? The timeline doesn't even line up for that. The ability for them to make the content to deliver in 2024 based on their taping schedule does not make any sense. So I don't really know what's going on over in NWA land at the moment. I mean, I do, but I don't, if that makes sense.
Well, it's always this to me is the real reality show content that is going on behind the scenes at the NWA right now. The television drama with Nick Hausman as your host, but he is also going to be your host of the brand new show Rumor and Innuendo with Robert Karpelis. Tell us a bit about the show that is launching Monday, how it came about, and what we can expect on a daily basis from Nick Hausman and Billy Corgan potentially dropping by maybe one of these days.
Wouldn't that be fun? I don't know that will be happening, John. I'll be quite honest. But no, this came together. I was looking for a new project to do. I wanted to get back to doing daily pro wrestling news on a platform that was widely available that people could enjoy. I hit up Conrad. We'd always said we wanted to do something together. Said, hey, we were both looking for something. Lo and behold, him and Dave Green, Mr. Podcasting, the guy behind Conrad Thompson, just got back from Podcast Movement. They were convinced they needed to get into the pro wrestling news space. They wanted to present a piece of content to their advertisers that was not about classic wrestling, which is pretty much their whole catalog. So we began to get to work. And Robert was easy pick when I was, tasked with finding somebody with a big platform that I like to work with, which he does, WWE Creative-ish, which will be streaming on about 250,000 followers on Twitter. Robert's a former WWE writer. He's producer MLW. He's helped MJF, Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara, all these guys find their way, between whatever it is that I do and his actual real world know-how. It's a pretty dynamic duo. We did a test show yesterday on the ad-free show's Patreon, had a blast. Everybody really enjoyed it. Got to do what you guys do with the comment section here. And it's going to only be a half hour, Monday through Friday, noon Eastern. Me and him, all the hits, occasional guests. We'll do some funny segments since he's a funny guy, does Wrestle Roast stuff, and just going to have a good time. So Rumor and Innuendo, find us Mondays, noon Eastern, and we will have it on the podcast feeds as well for those of you that want to listen in audio form.
What have you, just going back to, especially this year, like you've been following a lot of these big and small stories. What have you sort of taken away from this year? Like just being on the daily grind, and these can be very complex and sometimes mind-numbing stories to be looking at from all different angles. Just what's that been like to you in terms of doing this like on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to one big story, but this is your daily grind.
I think, again, and I'm glad I tuned in 15 minutes early to hear what you guys were talking about before I came on, because you guys were saying some really smart stuff. I think that the rehabilitation of WWE has been the big story this year. As much as people would want to say, oh, AEW's little off the tracks, losing interest, I think that, like you guys said, that's because WWE's getting its groove back, right? And again, change in creative direction. Vince is gone. That's something that's its own kind of thing where they're like, wow, we don't really like gross figures around our wrestling product anymore. So, again, maybe don't do yourself any favors. You bring Ric Flair in that regard. I just think that this year was a year of change in the vibe of the fans towards their products. There was a lot of things that happened this year that made people feel emotionally really connected to one product or the other. And I think what we're getting set up here for 2024 is this really epic showdown where Paul Levesque and Tony Khan are going to be throwing everything at each other. Because look, Tony has yet to announce a new TV deal. He can't go out there and get this thing if he's not got his cool factor and his groove on and is getting beat. So he's going to have to figure something out here. If it's not this tournament, it's going to be something else. This guy is trying things out right now. But Paul Levesque, he's got his playbooks. He knows what he's doing. And he wants, again, you talk about my stories this year. One of my biggest stories this year was just a story where I talked to people at NXT. They're like, yeah, Hunter and Sean, they want to send a message to Tony. That's why we're doing all this stuff on October 10th. Tony Khan quote retweeted that, calling them bald assholes. That is the second most traffic story of the year for me at House of Wrestling. And it is just heating up. And I think fans should get ready for a truly kick-ass 2024. I think these two companies are going to be pulling out all the stops in next year. And this year set the stage for that perfectly, I think.
Are you telling me you don't buy the narrative that WWE doesn't think at all about the number 2 wrestling company in the world and only concentrates on its main competitors, which are the NFL, Disney, and the NBA?
Look, I know for a fact they watch what AEW is doing because they want to know, because what AEW does affects how pro wrestling can be viewed in the marketplace. WWE does not like it when they are going and bleeding into each other's mouths, right? Because then people go, oh, that's wrestling. Wrestling's where you do that. That's not what WWE wants. They're actively trying to project a product that is not that, and they're trying to project an environment, for what it's worth, that is not like the culture that we have been heavily exposed to in AEW over the last year. So on both fronts, I think WWE is actively going to keep trying to do that. And be very interesting 2024.
No more eyeballs being extracted in matches. We're past that era now of WWE.
I don't think we're going to see that. You know, I'll leave everybody with this. One interesting an anecdote I've gotten a couple times from some very important people over there was that WWE is looking at this with the knowledge of what they learned from going up against WCW. And one of the biggest tactics that they learned up against WCW was take the young guys that are getting over, polish them up, and make them stars. Offload your talent that is older, that you are paying a lot of money for, and now has, you know, some idea of what they want, like creative control type stuff, and send them to the other side. And we're seeing that cycle right now. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if next year you see maybe a Daniel Garcia, right? Some other notable younger names over there that have been on the rise make their way over to WWE land. And as talent gracefully ages out and is looking for that next opportunity in their career, like an Adam Copeland, you're going to see more of those. And it is a tactic that WWE is embracing. And it's something I think that AEW should think about, because if that's something WWE is actively trying to do as a tactic to overload you and whatever, I don't know. Food for thought.
I think it was interesting. I guess maybe it's a couple years ago now, because it was Vince saying it on an earnings call where I think he was responding to a question about that was coming from an analyst about talent moving from WWE to AEW. Maybe it was around the time that Danielson moved and Punk debuted. And Vince's response was that he said something in context of a larger statement, but he said, perhaps we can give them some more. As if to say, yeah, let them take our talent, which whatever you want to make of that, that's a front for something. But I do think that there's a value in W trying to achieve a goal, which creates a perception that AEW is a place where younger wrestlers may develop and then they graduate on to WWE. Are there signs of that? Are there steps towards that happening already? Cody is a bigger star in WWE now than he was in AEW. Maybe Jade Cargill is another instance of that.
Jade, Pillman, right? They're trying with Pillman right now. A little rough, not gonna lie. But I know that their mindset right now is they're watching the young guys over there. And those younger talents are going to be more appealing to them than other veteran stars who may have wanted to go over there and up their profile. Unless they did a damn fine job of it. And for everyone who's asking, by the way, no, I don't believe CM Punk will be at Survivor Series this weekend. That would be a huge surprise on behalf of me and many other members of the press who have been led to believe that is not the case. And I don't really know how long it will be, if ever, that Punk does return to the WWE fold. He's kind of a special case here in this situation. I'm hearing more and more pessimistic comments about his return to WWE by the day.
So, when he doesn't appear at Survivor Series, though, can we blame you for him not being there?
Yeah, I mean, sure, why not? I mean, everybody else blames me for everything else, you know? Sit here drinking my lime Spindrift.
Oh, nicely done.
Look at this. The unofficial beverage of the of Brawl In. But everyone can go check out all of Nick's fine work, houseofwrestling.com, and the debut of Rumor and Innuendo this coming Monday. If not Billy Corgan, I do expect you to line up an exclusive with Goat Boy. Okay, that's my request.
I reached out to James Mitchell. He faved me. He did not want anything to do with the Nick Hausman interview. So
Probably
I tried.
Okay.
I tried.
Well, Nick, continue all your great work, and thanks for jumping on. Always a good time with you, and
Thanks,
enjoy the rest of your lime drink.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We'll do. Bye.
Thanks, Nick. Enjoy that Spindrift.
I was eyeing that. I'm like, is he drinking the drink? He was like, he was. Unbelievable. But there you go. Nick Hausman, everybody. On top of the whole NWA Billy Corgan cocaine incident, that is one of the more interesting stories of 2023. A lot happens through the Chicago figures of pro wrestling.
Yes.
But on that note, it'll be certainly interesting to see kind of where, like, does NWA pick up any traction from this? I mean, I will confess that until Lavi Margolin tweeted this out, I had no earthly idea that Women of Wrestling has been on the CW app for 2 years at this point. Now, I can also say I don't believe I can even get the CW app up here in Canada. But I mean, to me, just on the surface, the CW app is probably not going to be a game changer, but I guess it remains to be seen if there is any kind of television component to this. But I think it's an uphill climb, I would say, for anyone. It's not just getting on television, it's then ascending and getting some meaningful deal as well that is more than just quote unquote exposure.
Yeah, and when there was news broken about NWA being on the CW, I mean, there's a lot of subsequent questions around that. Like, is it going to be in prime time? Is this going to be syndicated like WoW is, where it's on at all different times, depending on where you are in the country? Or is it actually going to be in prime time at one time nationwide? Or at this point, is Power even going to air on CW proper?
Well, Brandon, are you going to be spending any of your Thanksgiving holiday binging NWA Power of the 8 episodes available?
Unfortunately, I will not. I will be visiting my family tomorrow.
Okay. Well, we want to wish Brandon a happy Thanksgiving coming up on Thursday. And you will be back on Sunday, correct, for Wrestlenomics?
I will be back on Sunday for Wrestlenomics Radio, which is a comedy podcast where the jokes are all about spreadsheets that everyone should tune into. It was a little unhinged last Sunday as we talked about. We talked about Tony Khan's comments from the press conferences and from the media call that had just passed. And we went through big data. I've been working hard in the Sublime text editor, coding in Python, and combining all the data sets of all the big wrestling databases, whether it's Cage Match Wrestling Data, the history of W.com, WrestleTix, Polestar, all combined into one mighty spreadsheet to ask questions like, those aren't complete data sets, but combine them into ask questions like, what was the average attendance and the total attendance of the World Wrestling Federation and WCW going all the way back to the mid 80s. So we got an idea of that this past Sunday, which I had a lot of fun with that.
When I was sent this covert Excel sheet with all these attendance data points going back to 1963, a wonderful gift in my inbox, Brandon.
It's a little dirty as I was looking through it again after sending it to you and others. But it's the best that we have yet, I think, in terms of aggregating all this information together. Probably really a large part of what motivated this is the timing of the Observer Hall of Fame. And, people always, we talk about our candidates and who we're going to vote for and not vote for. And a lot of that is based on, so-and-so had a great house show run with so-and-so. And all right, let's get the data centralized and look at that.
Yes. If you're missing out on Wrestlenomics, again, Sundays, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, you are missing out on the untold case for Ed Leslie in the Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame that Brandon has dug up some data points that might give some leverage behind an Ed Leslie case.
And I realized since Sunday's presentation that I somehow omitted Randy Savage, so there will be a correction and a rectification of that incident this coming Sunday. It'll have to be in the slides. But what people can't miss is these new news updates that you've been doing in audio. I've just been fascinated by this.
Oh, well, thank you so much. If you care to join our double or espresso tier at postwrestlingcafe.com, I've been doing audio versions of my written news updates. So those are coming out multiple times per week. Monday, we had Rob Bahari, aka Rob Viper, who we should definitely have on this show at some point. A lucha expert who was down in California over the weekend. He attended the West Coast Pro Show with Chris Hero's return, and then attended Full Gear. So we got into Rob's thoughts on those two shows as well into a nicely condensed package, trying to keep I think that Nick Hausman has the same idea as me, some shorter form audio content out there for the could you imagine a 30-minute wrestling show to follow each week? I mean, that's how a promotion makes inroads in 2024.
Yes, bite-sized content.
That's
10 minutes or less.
That's it. All right, everyone, that is it for us. Wei Ting and I are back tonight on the Post YouTube channel with Rewind to Dynamite. And then, of course, Wrestlenomics. As always, you can follow Wrestlenomics.com for all the latest ratings, notes, quarter-hour breakdowns, analysis, attendance figures, and he will be on top of everything coming up this weekend with Survivor Series weekend, and then a match-by-match rundown on Sunday, I am sure, with Jesse Collins.
I've been writing more posts than usual in the last couple of days, trying to take some of this Twitter energy and redirect it to Patreon and to subscribers, which is probably a healthy thing to do. So we'll see if that lasts.
Okay. We're back next week, everyone. We will have some guest here. We're we have thrown out the fishing rod. We're going to see if there's any bite on the bait. We're trying to land a sizable catch. We will see. And now I have jinxed our hopes of having this person. But regardless, we'll have someone here next week. So that is it for us. Thank you for tuning in. For Nick Hausman, Brandon Thurston, I am John Pollock, and thank you for tuning in to this week's edition.